Good day, Lamar students. The article that I wanted to discuss that I found fascinating is called Mandatory Reporting of Intimate Partner Violence, Safety or Retaliatory Abuse for Women. So the hypothesis discusses, or the question of the article is, would mandatory reporting and creating a law for that of abuse for women create a retaliatory response in their partner and put them in more harm, or would it reduce violence and harm? They did a study of 161 abused women, asking them 6 questions. The questions are: who should decide to report an adult's abuse to the police? What's interesting about this article is that 81% of these abused women said a nurse or doctor decides. This would go against the Code of Ethics, in which autonomy and where the client decides whether this should be reported is completely up to them. There's a conflict between 2 questions, though. One question that was asked of them is, it would have been easier for me to get help if there was mandatory reporting. 92% agreed with that statement. However, the conflicting question is, I would have been at greater risk for abuse if there was mandatory report, which was 53%. So the statistics don't necessarily line up where the women feel it would have been easier to get help and yet been at greater risk for abuse. So the question remains, should mandatory reporting of abused women be enforced by state law? Currently, there are 6 states that require laws and health professionals to report. They are California, Colorado, Kentucky, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and New Mexico. These healthcare providers that work in this state are required to report abuse in women. Some things that I found interesting or raised concern or questions in me is wondering if the population of sample women, if that were to change, if the results would have changed. For example, the majority of women were African American and spoke English. Would the results differ if it was a different race and a different gender, if males were asked the same question? Another question that was raised is, would the results differ if women were in a current abusive relationship or if it was post-abusive relationship? Another variable that we might want to take into account is that the majority of these women were not financially independent. So if the women were, would that change whether they wanted someone to report for them or they would do it themselves? What was also interesting is 78% of this group of women had children. And the question that I want to ask is, would there be different results if all of them had children or if none of them had children? And or even younger kids versus older kids, would that change the results? So to conclude, right now we are told not to report for the safety of our clients unless they are vulnerable or a child. But 6 states do have mandatory reporting. And so it's good to know the laws in our state, and research still needs to be done on whether that is in the best interest of the client. Thank you.